Hello, and welcome to the Culturally Complex Podcast. My name is Sam Musgrave. I am the host. Um, I honestly never really saw myself starting a podcast, let alone being the host of one. Um, so it'll be a learning curve for sure, but we'll figure it out one day at a time. Um, so yeah, this is the first episode. Well, a re-record of the first episode. Because I didn't like the way the first one turned out when I originally recorded it. Um, but I really just want to it's gonna be a solo show. But I really wanted to talk about what you know this podcast is gonna be about, why I started it, and then also just give a little bit about my story. Um, so the reason, I guess, well, let's start with what this podcast is going to center around, and it's going to center around adoption, um, and specifically talking about experiences with adoption. So I'm kind of interviewing different adoptees from different places, and talking about you know what adoption means to them, different experiences they had growing up, where they lived, and everything. Um, I'm also hoping to maybe talk to a couple parents to talk about, you know, how adoption ended up being the way that they, you know, built a family, and kind of what it means to be an adoptive family and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that's kind of going to be the format. It's just me interviewing different people and hearing their stories. I know it's been eye opening for me to even hear the people that I've interviewed already, um, about their experiences and how it just differs so much from mine. Uh, but it's I think it's important to hear these stories, because as I was researching before I started this, you know, adoption was always kind of something that seemed to be just a quick fact about somebody rather than you know who they are, because adoption is something that just shapes someone's entire life, whether or not they realize it. I know I didn't for a long time, uh, but yeah, I think you know it's gonna be very good for all these people to talk about their story, and for the viewers to listen and hear about it and everything. Um, so I guess, kind of moving on from that, why I started it, me specifically, it's because I am an adoptee myself. But um, which I guess the first thing I always ask adoptees that come on here is where they were born and where they were raised. So for me, I was born in Guatemala and I was raised in Eastern Kentucky. Um, so yeah, definitely a shift from those two. Um, but that's you know why I started it, is because it's something that obviously affects me. Um, and again, just reading all these different stories and also just interviewing people, it's obviously there's definitely a space that needs to be filled as far as talking about it. Um, so I guess kind of moving on to what my story is a little bit, is so my adoptive mother, her name was Juanaberta Lopez Lopez. Don't know why the Lopez Lopez. I guess they didn't want to hyphenate. Um, but she was married to a man, and had 5 kids by him. He ended up passing away, however, and she ended up getting into another relationship with another man, my birth father, um, and she got pregnant with me. He didn't want to be father, I guess, and so he left. And um, from what the adoption papers that we got, he didn't like her children from her other husband either. Um, so he left her alone to kind of raise 5 with me on the way. And then I believe she kind of heard about adoption, and that's how she kind of ended up, putting me up for adoption, was, just not being able to raise 6 kids now, which is like understandable. Like, I could not imagine raising one child, let alone 5 on my own. Or so I can see why, and just not being able to provide for them too. Like, she was fairly poor, so it would be difficult. So you know, I figured it's a difficult decision for her, but I also realized that it was probably the right one, was because she wouldn't be able to take care of all of them and provide for, all of them, and then also me. Um, but yeah, uh, which we don't know if that's actually 100% true. uh, so with Guatemalan adoption, I believe was a problem. It was really big to adopt from Guatemala in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Um, and it just became like so popular and in Guatemala, I believe people were able to make like money from it. Um, and so what I believe was happening was people were just like taking kids, um, and just putting them up for adoption and like taking them from their families, and you know it just wasn't a good situation. So they ended up closing down adoption from Guatemala, um, which is like understandable if that is like true. Like, can't just be taking random kids and putting them up for adoption. Um, but as far as my story goes, like, I believe it's true, but there's always that small doubt in your mind that it might not be. Um, but yeah, kind of moving on from that, like how I was brought to America. So my birth mom, or not my birth mom, my adoptive mom, um, she had actually adopted my older sister from Guatemala, and then she wanted another child. So she once again went to the adoption agency that she used. And I guess too, to like preface my sister's adoption, was that there was, I believe, a few families where we lived in Kentucky that had adopted from Guatemala, and also some other countries too. Um, and so she had seen that was like a way to like build a family, and she always wanted kids. She wasn't able to have them on her own, and she was never married. She was a single mom, but she wanted a family. So she looked into adoption, and that's how my sister came along. And then she also wanted a son, so that's where I came along. But you know, kind of going into that story a little bit, like, when she was originally looking to adopt another child, she wanted a boy. She knew that much. But at the time, I believe there weren't any boys up for adoption. Um, and so she was like just planning to get another girl, if she wasn't able to get another boy, or get a boy. And so she, like, I believe she, like, was going to get another girl. And then at some point, the adoption agency called somebody in my family, and said, hey, is Tamara Musgrave there? And they were like, no, she's running late for something. And they were like, okay, well, there's been a girl put up for adoption, and would you want to get the ball kind of like rolling with that? And so they left a message for her. She was running late, and then that girl ended up being like, adopted to a different family. And so when she called back, they were like, oh, well, that girl is no longer like up for adoption, but there's just now been a boy put up for adoption, and that was me. So kind of like serendipitous, just like how that worked out. But also just, that's just how my mom is. She's constantly running late. And so, you know, that's just like, I think that was just almost a stroke of luck. Um, but yeah, so that's, kind of how I ended up, you know, being adopted by her. Um, and I also have two younger siblings because at some point when I was young, like I said, I want a brother. And then when my sister heard me say that, she said, I want a sister. So that's when my mom looked into adopting two more kids. Um, and all of us are adopted from Guatemala. I don't believe any of us are blood related. Um, although I will say my brother and I do look kind of similar. Um, but we don't know like for sure. Uh, but yeah, so you know, single mom, uh, four adoptive children. Uh, yeah, quite a dynamic for sure. Um, so yeah, I guess I also kind of want to talk about what it was like growing up in Kentucky. Um, so for me, like I never really had any negative experiences growing up. Um, it might just because the town was so small, everybody knew each other. Um, my mom was a doctor and she, treated a lot of people in the area. So anywhere I went, somebody like probably knew my mom and then knew us by like, or knew me and all my siblings by like association. um, so yeah, like I would say like, even though it was a small town, a majority white town, um, which I believe I was like one of five people in my entire high school class that, you know, was a person of color. Um, and um, so it's kind of shocking that I never got like any like things said to me um, or got like hate crimed, I guess. But it's I'm fortunate that that never happened. Um, and I'm also very grateful because like the people there were very nice. Like everybody, like I said, everybody kind of knew each other. Um, and like a lot of people in that area are just like were like family to me. So, um, yeah, like I surprisingly never had any like things said to me about like me being adopted or me being like a different like skin color than everybody else. And uh, like I'm very fortunate for that because even the people that I've interviewed for this podcast, like they've had stuff said to them, and like you know, hearing that, it's kind of like, oh well, like I was lucky that I never had anything like said to me, at least not to my face that I know of. There could have been somebody saying like things about me. I don't know. Um, but I guess we'll never know. um, although, like, one thing that I talk about too with the adoptees is like, is there anything that happened to you when you were younger that maybe looking back was like, maybe like racist or like, you know, um, just microaggressive, I guess you could say. Uh, and sometimes they're like, yeah, that's like, there, I can think of a few. And like, looking back, there's only one experience. And like, I don't know. It was weird. Like somebody, this girl, she was white, um, came up to me and or came into class one day and was just like, my favorite word today is N word, without the hard R, but still like you're a random white girl from Kentucky. You shouldn't be saying that. Um, and so she was like, that's my favorite word today. And then so she comes up to me. She was like, Sam, you're my N word. And I was like, okay. And like, well, first of all, you shouldn't be saying that to anybody. Second of all, I'm Hispanic, so wrong. Um, but like that was the only thing I can think of like a experience where I was like, oh, like looking back, yeah, I probably should have said something about that, but at the time I was just like, and then went on about my day. Um, but yeah, I think, like I said, it's just like I'm glad that that's the only thing that I can think of because I'm sure it could have been much worse. Um, but yeah, moving on from that, like, uh, after I graduated high school, my family moved to Virginia, and I started college. I went to a small, kind of Christian school in Tennessee, Milligan, and I was a diversity scholar. So um, it's, our job was kind of like, it was like, the description was like to enrich people's knowledge about like different cultures or something. I don't know, but I was a diversity scholar, um, and you know, there was a bunch of people in that program who were like from Latin American countries. There was also people from like China, like different countries, like in Africa, um, like just it was a variety of people. Obviously, diversity. Um, and actually, this first interview I did with somebody was somebody from that program with me, and so I specifically wanted to talk about like uh, the like people from like different Latin American countries. Um, a lot, like a majority of them were from uh like they were from Texas, but like kind of at the very bottom of Texas, like super close to Mexico, and so they had family in Mexico, and like their families were Hispanic, and so they all like knew about that culture and everything. And then there's me who comes in, and like I look the part of a Hispanic person, so they try to like speak Spanish to me, and I'm like, no, because I don't speak Spanish, I'm not bilingual. um and so I was just like I don't know what to do. Like I feel so, I guess, like I feel like an outsider, I guess, um to compared to these people. um and it felt weird because I obviously, like, I'm from like a Hispanic country, um but I almost felt like I was ostracized um from them, like even though like I considered them my friends. um and like I'm friends with a lot of them too today. Even though I was friends with them, I still felt like there was a bit of like, I felt ostracized, and I felt like I shouldn't be learning about anything to do with Hispanic cultures because I wasn't raised in it, and I also felt like super judged uh, for trying to learn about it. So yeah, it just, I don't know. It wasn't bad per se, but also it kind of put me in like an identity crisis of like, oh, like I was born into this culture, but feel like I shouldn't be learning anything about it because I'm not like worthy, I guess, which shouldn't be true. Um, and so yeah, that was difficult. Um, like one specifically interaction I remember too, um, was somebody that I was like friends with. Um, they were talking about, you know, who they picked for the diversity scholarship, and um, it was somebody who had actually like applied to be a diversity scholar at this college, but didn't, I believe, didn't get it. And then um, they said something to me like, "Oh, they don't pick actually diverse people like me to be a diversity scholar. They pick people like you." And I just remember feeling like, oh, like I can't believe you like said that to my face. um, but yeah, like didn't feel great. uh, and that again added to that like feeling of, oh, I shouldn't even be attempting to learn anything about the culture I was born into because I'm like just some adoptee from Guatemala that lived in Eastern Kentucky his whole life. Um, so yeah, I like that was one interaction where I was like, okay, well, like this, like people actually feel this way about me. Um, yeah, it wasn't fun. I've moved on from that though. Like, you know, I've kind of come into my own, being like, I, you know, even though I wasn't raised in like Hispanic culture, I still feel like it's not bad for me to try to like learn about it and like incorporate that into like who I am. Um, so yeah, I'm still like, you know, trying to learn Spanish, trying to like learn about food and everything. Um, but I don't feel like guilty about it anymore. Uh, so yeah. And I also wanted to talk about too what it was like. Um, so oh, I don't remember if I mentioned like after I graduated high school, I moved to Virginia. If I did, sorry. Um, After I graduated, my whole family like moved to Virginia, and like it was the summer before I went to college, and um, I my mom and like was wanting me to get a present for somebody from like a store here where we moved, and I went to the store and I was just like looking around at different stuff. It was like a very it was like a small business. Um but I went in, was looking for like something, but I was like taking pictures. I didn't know what this person like what my mom wanted for this person's gift, and so I was taking pictures and sending to her, and I was like, do you think they would want this? Do you think they would want that? And like she's like wasn't answering quickly. And so I had to spend like a lot of time in there, and I was just like wandering around. Um, at one point, I went to go take a picture of something to send to my mom, being like, "Do you think they would like this?" Um, and I noticed this lady kept like following me around, and I was, you know, kind of just I noticed it, but I just didn't think anything of it. Um, but whenever I went to go take a picture of this one thing, she said, "Don't take pictures in here." And I was like, "Oh, sorry." Like I was like, "I'm sorry. I was just trying to like send this picture." And she goes, "I don't care." She said, "Don't take pictures of anything in here." And I just remember being like, "Okay." And I just like I immediately felt uncomfortable, and um like I don't know. I realized I was like, "Oh, like it just felt hostile." So I just grabbed something and went to go check out. And whenever I went to go check out, I was just like trying to make conversation with the guy at the front. And I was like, yeah, like I'm getting a gift for someone. Like, I don't know what they like. So I was sending this to my mom to see. And he goes, yeah, he said, yeah, yeah, I know you were looking at a lot of this stuff or something. I don't even know. Um, but kind of implying that he like, the lady that was following me, like had told him to like, watch out for me, because he was on like the opposite side of like the wall, so he couldn't see me, but he knew that I was like walking around taking pictures of this stuff. And um that's when it kind of like hit me. I was like, oh, they think I'm gonna steal something. um and yeah, it just like I remember going to my car and just like calling my mom and being like, I like I was like, I've never had that happen to me before. I've never had anybody follow me around. I've never had anybody think I was gonna steal something. Um, because like I said, the town in Kentucky was so small, like everybody knew each other, so like I could go in anywhere and just not like know somebody. And like coming here to Virginia, it was just like nobody knew me, so they immediately like they see the color of my skin and was just like, oh, he's definitely a thief. um, and so it was just like a wake up call for me. Like I was like, oh, I was like, that's what the rest of the world is like. um, so it didn't like it didn't feel good. I was really upset about it, honestly. Like I remember like kind of crying and just I I cried. And I was just like I don't I never experienced that before. So it was just like a weird like sensation to me to like feel like I was being so like I guess judged so quickly and easily. Um so it didn't it was yeah, it was bad. And to be fair, I like whenever I told like my mom or grandma, I don't know, um they had like gotten in contact with somebody in the store. Because I think they like I don't know, but they just like let somebody know that like, you know, I had been like profiled, basically racially profiled. Um and you know, one of like I don't remember his name, but he was somebody like who had like stuff in the store, um and also somehow like involved with like the ownership or something. I don't remember, but he had like invited me back and like really did like apologize like for that interaction that I had with the people in there that day. Um and like he really like I think he truly meant that, and I honestly appreciated that so much because I know that that's not like that's something that doesn't happen to people. Like they never get apologies for being profiled in a store. um but like I said, it was just such a big deal to me because like I never had that happen to me before. And you know, it it was just so weird to actually experience it. um so yeah, it definitely shifted my like worldview because you know I had lived in like a bubble, and then all of a sudden my bubble popped. um and so like not only just moving to Virginia and having that experience, but also like I said, like moving to college and like realizing that like, oh, like it created like a disconnect in me. Like I knew I didn't fit in with the people that I was in this diversity program with, and I also like I had the wake up call of like, you know, I live in a world where, you know, white people are going to judge me because of the color of my skin. So it like I literally was having like a crisis because I didn't realize that my life was just going to be so different now. Um and you know, it took an effect on my mental health too, like having that like, you know, I guess like all these like just I guess having all these new experiences and um them being kind of negative really like took an impact on me. um I had to start therapy, um and it helped me a lot. um yeah, like I you know, I just had to talk to like somebody about like what I was feeling. um because obviously like I didn't feel good about myself at all. uh as far as like my identity went. Like I just didn't know like where I fit in anymore. um so yeah, it was tough, but you know, therapy definitely helped. And um yeah, I don't really want to like leave this on like such a depressing note. I feel like I did. um but that's just like my honest experience. Just kind of having to like deal with all these different like feelings and emotions. Like I said, like therapy has definitely helped me a lot. um I've definitely become more like comfortable with who I am, and you know, it's still difficult. I'm not going to say that life is just so easy now, that I've like quote figured it out. But you know, I think it's just kind of it's helped me come to terms with where I'm at, and it's definitely helped me like realize like I know my worth despite what the world I live in tells me, and despite what people have told me to my face. Um, so yeah, I think, if you're an adoptee listening and you kind of have like felt the same way that I did, one, you're not alone. And two, like reaching out to people to talk and like, getting help, like even professional help if you can, like it does help with those feelings. Um, yeah. Sorry to be so depressing at the end there. Um, but, you know, I hope that listening to this podcast will help like even one person to realize that they're not the only person that feels this way, or they're not the only person that has experienced, life in a different way than everybody else, and that, you know, growing up with, growing up with people that are different from you is not a bad thing. And then also, trying to connect with that culture that you were born into is also like not a bad thing either. And that it's okay to be curious, and it's okay to want to learn about yourself essentially, and to figure things out. And yeah, so I hope that this first episode has been, informative, I guess, as to like where we're wanting to go with this podcast and everything. And maybe hearing my story made you realize, oh, there's someone else that's experienced this too. So yeah, there's definitely lots more to come and lots more stories to hear, and a lot more experiences that we all might have in common. And yeah, I hope you all tune in for the episodes to come. And yeah, I hope everything, or all the episodes, bring some value to your day. Maybe even like make you smile a little bit. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm glad I got to tell my story and then kind of share a little bit about where I want this podcast to go. So yeah, be sure to come back and listen to some of the new episodes that are coming up. And yeah, I'm glad you got to listen. Thank you.